fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Mr. Joe Goldberg is here.
I'm in a house.
You're in the house. You're sort of in the house.
I'm in the grandkids' house in Kokomo, Indiana, coming to you live from my makeshift podcast booth in a bedroom in Kokomo, Indiana.
Yeah.
Me and Kevin and Al.
You're dedicated, man. You're
I'm here
all
for
the way
you.
there. It's your
That's my paycheck.
It's your holiday, and you're all
I'm
there.
spring breaking. I'm spring breaking for you.
Oh, it's spring break too, isn't it for you? See,
Yeah.
spring break's already happened here and gone, so it's over.
Well, there's no spring, and I'm from Chicago's.
Yeah,
We're
just
in
winter and
project.
summer.
Tornadoes were by last night in Indiana.
Well,
I love the weather.
Yeah.
Anyway, here I am. I'm in Kokomo.
Well, so listen, we've got a writer here, and of course, there's something different, and we're going to be talking about, he's got a 3-book series, and we're going to be talking about those and writing and all that stuff, and it's the Huebsch novel series, book 1, 2, 3, and we've got The Killer's Sermon, The Killer's Terms, and The Killer's Speech. There's a lot of killing going on here. So, Kevin Kluesner, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Alan, Joe, thanks for having me. This is, it's a treat. I'm like a big deal in Wisconsin, but I'm trying to get out, known in the West Coast a little bit. And so I really appreciate you guys having me on, even if I'm reaching Indiana a little bit.
He's
He's
big in New Berlin.
Yeah.
And I know all about the tornadoes here in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
What got you into writing? What made you decide I'm going to write books?
I've always considered myself a writer. I think a lot of people do, but my undergrad was in journalism, and I thought I was going to be the next Woodward Bernstein. Some of your younger audience members might not know those people, but they broke Watergate back in the day. But I fell in love after my junior year in college and married a girl from my hometown, and she had a year left of school in another university, and they only had one daily newspaper. And this is back in 1980 when mortgage rates were going up to 20% and jobs were scarce. And long story short, my career started in public relations. And, way leads to way. We had 3 kids, and the whole time, I'm a writer. You don't get away from that. But I was writing memos and different things instead of novels. But, I ended up, in my career, I ended up being the hospital president of a large urban safety net hospital here in Milwaukee. But during that time, I wrote my first novel, The Killer's Sermon. And it took me over 30 years to write that. So I guess I was a little bit slow. I understand that. But, kind of life got in the way. And the other thing is, I was a pantser trying to be a plotter. And you can spell that. For me, it was 2 Ds. But I think it's usually spelled 2 Ts. But, I had my whole outline, everything chapter by chapter, and that handcuffed me. And I read Stephen King's On Writing, and he talked about that, and he talked about how professional authors sit down and write, and amateurs wait to be inspired. And it just something clicked for me. And I sat down, and in 4.5 months, I basically had my book finished, and it was knitted into a story, and then I went in search of a publisher. So, I don't know why did it take me so long? Raising kids, following another career, trying to put food on the table for the family.
So, Kevin, you said that you're a writer, and then you used the word story. And I like to ask the question about going from being a writer to being a storyteller. How did you see that as you created your character in your book?
Well, you know what? I think being a storyteller is important if you're going to be a leader in almost any line of work. Because if I'm trying to get people to follow me, no matter what we're trying to do, like, for instance, I ran a hospital during the pandemic, and to be able to tell the story of what we were up against and how we had to work together, and to do that in a compelling way that I could get people behind me during a time of crisis, that's kind of the big issue. But there were also smaller issues that the whole storytelling was important to. But I think it's a talent that any leader would need. And when I was trying to tell the story in The Killer's Sermon, I picked a really hard topic because the topic was reproductive health and reproductive rights. And I had this idea for a story where I had an FBI agent who was very much pro-life, and Michele Fields is the reporter from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, who's very much pro-choice. And I had to see if they could put aside their differences in order to catch a killer. And in doing that, could they find respect and maybe even more? I mean, that was the story that I was trying to tell, and it's obviously a very divisive issue. And to be able to tell that without completely offending either side was a tightrope that I walked with that book. But I think I must have done something okay because, it's got a 4.7 out of 5 rating out there on Amazon, and I think I threaded the needle as well as I personally could on my debut book.
Yeah, that's a wild choice to begin with because, man, there's a lot going on with that, especially nowadays. How did you get into the dialogue of these characters then when they have opposites? Because you're going to have your own feelings and opinions and stuff, and then you're going to have to think about what the audience is going to be thinking when you write these things. So how do you create dialogue between characters in a tight situation like this?
Well, I'm one of those people who feels like we should be able to talk about pretty much any issue without losing our cool or without losing respect for the other side. So I have done that pretty much my whole life. And I know people on both sides of that issue, on the polar sides and people in the middle. And frankly, I grew up a cradle Catholic. So I started out on one end of the spectrum. I moved toward the other side of the spectrum, and I probably sit somewhere in the middle these days. And I understand people's feelings on both sides. And so for me to find that voice, for kind of the disparate voice of different characters, again, that was the challenge for me. But I had a lot of beta readers, early readers that I had take a look at the book and tell me if I had these voices. These characters can't represent everybody on the sides, but they have to represent authentic voices on the sides of those issues. And so when I had enough people saying, I think you've got this right, or it's a great story, that's when I said, okay, let's try to find a publisher.
Yeah, that's a tough one. So are you writing with intention then? Do you have kind of like when you form the story, were you thinking of it as something you want to say, or an opinion, or is there like a, kind of subtext, or did it just develop when you create the characters? Like how does that go? It just
developed. If I'm trying to say anything, it's that we should, again, be able to talk about any issue without losing our cool and maintaining respect for the other side. And yeah, I hate it. I have read thriller novels, which is what I write, which I read voraciously. I've read some where both on the left and the right, the author is trying to kind of bring me over to their side of an issue. And I don't like it. I think it's called agendizing. What I'm trying to do is not tell people what to think, but to challenge them to think. And again, that first issue was kind of a crazy issue. If I was thinking what's going to work well commercially, I don't know that would have been my first choice. And I think it complicated my journey when I was trying to find a publisher. But like in my second book and my third book, I get into societal issues like big pharma. My last book, I get into congressional term limits. I've talked about human trafficking, journalistic integrity, vigilantism, and I'm not even sure on some of this what my opinion is. On the issue of congressional term limits, it's almost 90% of us believe that our U.S. senators and representatives ought to have term limits. And it's more than 80% of Republicans, more than 80% of Democrats, and more than 80% of independents. So you're like, well, why haven't we gotten this done if these people are supposed to represent us? So I guess in a situation like that, I am trying to, tell a story and get people to think about it. But again, I've never posted something about my political views about candidates or or some of these different issues. But some of those big issues like big pharma and congressional term limits that we're pretty united on, we just can't get our representatives to do anything about it. Those are the ones that seem to find their way into my books more often now.
Hey, Kevin, I want to ask you about how you built out your series, but maybe you can say something about the series itself, the character, the storyline. You base it in Wisconsin, of all places. So tell me about your character, Cole, whatever his last name is, and cause, yeah, because you have a series. There's something behind the series. So I'm interested in the stories.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you know what? I love series. So, Robert Crace, for instance, and his Elvis Cole, Joe Pike series is set in L.A. And to me, that I just can't wait till, and I know you guys had him on not too long ago, and I can't wait till his next book comes out. John Sanford, he has a series set in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, with Lucas Davenport. I love that series. And Paul Levine down in Miami and the Keys had Shake Lassiter. And they're all different. One is a private eye. One works for the Minnesota Bureau of Investigation, I think it is. And then Jake Lassiter's an attorney. Mine, Cole Huebsch, and I look to Alan now because he keeps pronouncing that last name right. But Cole Huebsch is an FBI agent in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And he's actually the special agent in charge. And typically, special agents in charge don't get out and do as much field work as he does. But he's a good leader who likes to get out and continue to stay in the field from time to time so that the people under him respect that. But and I love setting it in Wisconsin. I could set it in other places, but I don't think I'd be as authentic. I was born and raised in a small town on the other side of the state called Prairie du Chien, right hard on the Mississippi River. Growing up, I used to tell people that I grew up on the West Coast, and then under my breath, I'd tell them of Wisconsin.
I've been to Prairie du Chien. I've been there many times. I've gone to that Piggly Wiggly.
That's hilarious. A lot of people know it because there was a Jesuit high school there called Campion, where the president of Mexico went there, Fox, and a number of other people you would know, George Wendt from Cheers and others. But anyway, I feel like the series is much more authentic because I've set it here in Wisconsin. So the other thing is my publisher always, every book starts out with the names and the places are fictitious. But I use real restaurants. My protagonist loves a good craft beer, especially an IPA, and I use real beers. And then later, I've never taken any money. There's no product placement or endorsement or anything. But I keep telling these brewers, if you ever want to give me a little product, I'd be glad to take it. But anyway, that's one of the things. If you look at the reviews of my books, people love the fact that they're set in Wisconsin and Prairie du Chien, Milwaukee, different places. And what I love about it is when you set stories in Wisconsin, I can have weather that's 20 degrees below zero. There's 2 feet of snow on the ground. I can come back a season later or two, and it could be 110 degrees and high humidity. It could be drought. It could be flooding. It's just, I think it's, I just love it. It's a place I love, and so why wouldn't I write about this place?
In a way, it's like a character, right? And you develop a whole setting that becomes real. Do you hear your characters? Are you that kind of writer that hears voices and see them? Do you picture what your characters would look like as you write them?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And by now, there are a number of characters besides those kind of 2 main protagonists that are in each book, and different ones will kind of come to the fore depending on the story that I'm trying to tell. And so I get to know each of the characters, even more minor characters, a little better as each story goes along and as I pick up new threads. And yeah, it's kind of, they're like family now. I can't imagine that they wouldn't be in my life. So yes, I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah. Are you going to put Joe? Joe can work. He's got the time. So if you need someone to play Cole, then
I know where Wisconsin is. I've been there.
Yeah. If somebody offers me, the screenplay or whatever, and they want to make it into movie or a series, I'm thinking Joe might be a good guy to have in it.
That's right.
Yeah.
All of our dreams.
You can't say his last name, but that's...
Yeah, Goldberg. It's German.
Yeah, you can just...
So when you started book one, it took you 30 years plus 4.5 months. Did you know where the characters were going? Did you have the arc, or was it kind of like one book at a time? Now what happens to Cole? Now what happens to the other characters?
No, it's really been one book at a time. And as a matter of fact, when I finally found my publisher, and I think it was on my 79th kind of targeted email to different literary agents or publishers, when they got back to me and they said, we love the manuscript. They said, we have 3 questions. Would you be willing to work with an editor? The second one was, are you willing to help promote the book? Do things like this. And then the third one was, tell us more about books 2 and 3. And I had pitched it as a series because I knew investigating them, that's what they liked. And I get it. Somebody reads your third book and they love it and they go back and they read the first 2. But I really had nothing else. And so I had to quickly cobble together a synopsis for book 2, and I put together a couple of chapters. And I said, I have no problem working with an editor, and I'll be passionate about promoting the books. And here's a synopsis of book 2 and a couple chapters. And I just sent it off and hope for the best. And they sent me a contract for 3 books, and off we went. But yeah, I had no idea when I first started that it was going to be a series. But once I started it, and again, once I moved away from being a plotter and becoming a pantser, it's really all I need to know is kind of the beginning of the book and have a little bit of an idea of the end, and then jump into it, start writing. It's an organic, fun way to write. I would have never imagined I could do that, but that first book came out December 2021. The next book was published in April of 2023, and this book came out this past October. So you can see that, I now I've got kind of a rhythm. It doesn't take me 30 years anymore, which is great, because I'm not sure I'd live long enough to see the next book come out.
Yeah, it'd be a long time. Did you have a method of keeping track then of what your characters and the events and the things they do, the color of their eyes, all the different little, the particles that make up the story?
I don't really have I see some authors with like these spider boards and stuff that they can go to, and they've got all this stuff connecting and what. No, I've got like my characters. I can tell you what their eye colors are and that type of thing, and I can go back and sometimes I have to research. And, the nice thing about writing these days is I can go on like just the Word document from one of my last books, and I can pull up something just by searching for it and say, oh, yeah, that's what happened. But no, I can't imagine, though, if I do this and I have 17 books in the series or 20 like Robert Crace, then I'll be in trouble.
Yeah, and people will call you out. Boy, they'll get it.
Hey, Kevin, I'm going to go back to the characters, because characters are kind of what drive books. Stories are for story, but characters are people remember. So what was it that you were trying to get into the characters, their mentality, their quirks, their whatever it might be, to make people say, this is somebody who I want to read through 3 books? Well,
I think with Cole in particular, I wanted to create a character that, in some ways he's larger than life, right? He's pretty intelligent, he's strong, he's good looking, not too good looking, but he's good looking. So I wanted somebody that, it's just somebody maybe a guy would want to be like that guy. I also wanted to create a character, and people tell me I've done this, where he wants to be the best person he can be. And he wants to right wrongs. He wants to see justice done. And if he steps over the line, it bothers him. And so you'll see him have a crisis of sometimes confidence, faith, whatever. He's not somebody who's just completely self-assured and whatever. So pretty much every character in my book, I don't want them to be kind of a cardboard cutout and you say, oh yeah, I've seen that character many times. And what's funny about it is when that first book came out, there was only one character who I felt like was a little bit of a cardboard character. And I was doing an interview on a radio show. And the interviewer asked me about that one character. He's kind of a minor character. He's another FBI agent who's not that nice a guy. She said to me, I just can't wait to see what this guy does in the next book. And I was thinking he's never going to appear again. So you never quite know what people are looking for. And I really did resurrect him in my third book. I didn't touch him in the third book or second book, but did in the third. And then the other thing, like I said, is I've got people that are characters, and I call them people, who might be a minor character in one book. And then I see something in them where they can bring something to the story. And all of a sudden I'm learning a lot more about that character. The same way a reader would almost, where I'm just like, oh, I didn't see that in that character. So, I'm trying to develop people that are human. They've got their good points. They've got their bad points. But for my protagonists, I want them to be led. Their North Star is they want to do the right thing. Sometimes they might not be able to do it, or they fall short in some way, but they're striving to be the best they can be.
Well, then tell me about the bad people.
The bad people surprise me too, right, as I write them. And I had a lot of fun with a character in my second book, and it's the villainess, if you will. It's a woman, and she heads up kind of a consortium for Big Pharma. And she is not a nice person, and she uses a lot of different things to get her way, and one of them is her looks and her sexuality. It kind of turns the Me Too movement a little bit on its head. But I had a lot of fun writing that. I might have gotten a little bit edgy in some scenes, but I never tried to say that my books were cozies or anything like that. But it was kind of funny because I came up with this character, and readers have told me. I just did an author talk at a library locally last night again, and they like that character, and they haven't seen a character like that. And one of the funny things is I have people who know me all the time, and they, when I'm creating characters and I come up with names, I'm typically like Frankenstein, and I'll take a first name from somebody I know, and I'll, like smack it together with a last name of somebody I know, and I'm diabolical. I'm laughing about this as I do it. But I had a lifetime friend. I've known this woman since kindergarten. And when that first book came out, she said, I was kind of disappointed you didn't use my name at all. And I was like, oh, okay. And so when I did the second book, that villainess, I used her last name. And it's just hilarious because this person could not be less like that character. And then when the book came out, when it was just about ready to be published, I reached out to her and said, Nancy, I used your last name, just so you know. And but I said, you'll have to tell me what you think. And luckily, she's got a kind heart, and she's got a great sense of humor, so she liked it. But yeah, the villains are, in some ways, they're more fun to write. And, we all have some dark sides, and so I have to reach deep into that dark side of myself to come up with some of the things. And it scares me sometimes what I find there.
Did you kill Nancy?
I didn't, no, but one of the characters...
You, as the author, killed.
...certainly thinks about it. I don't want to give anything away, but...
Okay. Well, I had a character. I used a friend of mine, and I killed him, and he took pride in that. I am the first one dead, all right? Usually it's like, oh, don't kill me. And he's like, thank you for killing me.
That's hilarious. It's just working with the characters, the character development, to me it's huge fun. Just a blast. I have so much fun with that.
So what do you think you get out of writing these books? How does it affect you?
Well, to me, engaging with readers, it's just, I've always thought of myself as a writer. There was a long time ago I was working full time for a hospital, and I was working in public relations, and there was an opening at the daily newspaper for a part-time outdoor writer. And I went to my boss at the hospital, and I said, hey, would you care if I tried for this job? I said I'd basically be hunting, I'd be fishing, I'd be gathering, doing other things, but it would be nights, weekends. And he looked at me and he said, if it helps you get a better GD relationship with that newspaper, he said, yeah, go ahead. And so I went for that job, and I got it. And so for over a year, I worked full-time in healthcare, and I was writing a story, a column. I had to take all the photos, And every Sunday, that outdoor page was mine. It was just such a thrill for me. And one of the things was connecting with readers. And that's when I learned the excitement about that. And I'll tell you, the over-the-top moment I had as an outdoor writer was when I had done a story on visiting a blue heron rookery. And if you know what those herons are, they're just massive water birds. And we went back in this rookery. I had a fisherman, and I was a fisherman, but I'm talking about a commercial fisherman who could get anywhere. And he got this boat back. I can't even believe we got back there, but we get back in this area, and there are all these really tall trees with these nests, huge nests, and they're all empty. And I thought, well, you know, they're not here anymore. But we had scared them out. We sat there for maybe 15 minutes, and they started to glide back into these nests. And it was almost like prehistoric, you know, with the pterodactyls or whatever. And I described that, you know, this is going back 40 years or so. But I received a letter, handwritten, from a woman. And she basically told me, she said she was a shut-in, and she had been home for a number of years, unable to really get outside of her house. And she said, for that moment when she was reading that story, she felt like she was right there in the boat with me. And it's moments like that that I write for. And it's the same thing with these novels. You know, if I can catch a moment that moves somebody in a certain way, and the first thing I'm trying to do is entertain, right? When I read books, I'm reading fiction. 90% of what I read, 90% of that are thrillers. I want to be entertained. I just want to, you know, be able to get away from the world for a while and enjoy myself. But if I can give somebody a feeling, if I can tell them something about, you know, term limits or something and educate them a little bit, if they get something else out of it, great. But I really want to connect with readers, and that's been the joy of this for me.
That's important. It really is. Have you set up a website? Have you got social media all over? Are you open to readers and fans and people communicating with you?
You know, it's kind of interesting. And my biggest social media platform is LinkedIn, because I was a leader in healthcare for 40 years. And so I have over 3,000 there. You know, I mean, I'm not like you guys with 100,000 or more. And I wasn't even on Facebook until my publisher said, when that first book was getting ready to come out, they said, get on Facebook. So I've been working on that and Instagram. And I have a website. It's kevinkluesner.net. I get people reaching out to me through that site. They can basically send me a note if I miss something. Like you said, Alan, I think it was you, you know, if I mess up on something, or if there's a typo, I've had a couple of those. But usually it's people reaching out and just saying, you know, I love the books, keep writing them. And I respond to every email. I think, you know, I guess if you're somebody like John Grisham or, you know, maybe even Robert, I don't know, you know, those guys are probably get so many letters and things, but I have time to respond to everybody right now, and I hope I always can.
Yeah, when you get like Joe, then, you know, he gets to
top of the pyramid.
All right, Joe.
It's upside down. It's upside down pyramid.
That's funny. Well, so are you working on the next book in this series right now, or have you got something else you're trying to do, or what's going on? Well,
I completed that 3-book deal, and my publisher, Level Best Books, wants to continue to work on that series, and I do too. But I did tell them I'm going to take a hiatus from that. I've got this idea for an historical fiction novel that is set back in the early 1830s, and includes people like Zachary Taylor, Jefferson Davis. The first doctor in Wisconsin happened to be a black woman. There's also Chief Black Hawk. There are all these different people that came together in Prairie du Chien back in the 1830s that ended up having a big impact on the United States and how we developed. And it was just an amazing confluence of people at this certain place at a certain point in time. And confluence also happens to be where a couple rivers come together. And the Wisconsin River, which is a big river in its own right, empties into the Mississippi in Prairie du Chien. So I have a title, The Confluence, and I have an idea. Now I just have to write the thing.
That's always the hard part, right?
Right.
Well, that's good. It's good to go back in history. I think it's interesting and it's something people need. So, well, it's been interesting. So we're going to put your book series up on our website, along with your website and everything, so people can find you, hunt you down, and tell you what you've done wrong. And we appreciate you being here. What have we got? The Cole Huebsch novel series, book 1, 2, 3, and it's Kevin Kluesner. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, Al. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome. Thanks.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.